live on YouTube, Instagram, and Getter. Friday Night Live with Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And Mayor, we'll let you take it away with opening remarks. Midterms just 11 days away. Some new polling and some key races. And we'll get some of your thoughts here as we get closer to Election Day.
Well, I think it's continuing to proceed the way it was for the last 4 or 5 days, certainly since the debates on Tuesday, which might be seen as a sort of a restoration of the Republican momentum. If not, it was sort of the point that you could point to as the restoration. The Republicans actually started to come back about a week earlier than that. Before that, it had been about a month of deterioration based on Democrats using the abortion issue mostly. And I think two things happened. Democrats overused, well, maybe more than that. Democrats overused the abortion issue, which gave the Republicans a chance to show the extreme Democrat position on abortion, which is abortion to the moment of birth, with some confusion even as to whether it can go beyond that. And so that I think moved the focus a good deal. The fact that they were talking only about that and other issues were predominating. The economy, the cost of living rising constantly, people going to the store, people going to buy furniture, people going to buy homes, seeing prices coming up, and Biden saying the economy is wonderful. Every time that happens, it's he's telling you that you shouldn't believe your lying eyes. He's telling the truth, and you see the price up, and you remember, oh, he's been there telling this story about how wonderful things are. I think that, by the way, is going to turn out to be a drastic, terrible mistake. They lie about everything. The major Democrat. Fetterman's debate was a constant lie, which you might attribute to his cognitive impairment, or you might attribute it to that's what Democrats do. But what was it? Just today, Biden said that when he came into office, there was inflation already. It was like 1.5%. That the price of gasoline was $5. Price of gasoline was about $2 when he came into office. Now people know that. If you tell an esoteric lie that only the people in Washington know, that's one thing. But don't start lying to them about the price of the things they're buying. Don't start telling them things are wonderful and they're paying 2.5 times more for food than they were paying when Trump was in office. So I think that started to sink in, and the failure of the Democrats to address it. Fetterman's answer, which I imagine most Democrats give a better answer than this, but during the debate, and no one really even noticed this because at least it was an intelligent word, he was asked, what are you going to do about inflation? His answer was a single word: more. Well, I think that's the truth. They're going to do more about inflation, which means they're going to spend more money. So I think these things are now kind of setting in. Now, there's time for them to retake the agenda, but I don't see what they're doing it with. They're sending out Obama, which might have some celebrity appeal. Certainly doesn't have any issue appeal. He's not talking about how to deal with inflation. He's not talking about how to deal with crime. He's not talking about how to deal with fentanyl overdose. He's not talking about how to deal with the border that's wide open and now creating problems both on the border states and in New York and Chicago and elsewhere. He's not talking about the terrible foreign policy situations that he and Biden have put us in. He's talking about abortion again. And now he's talking about abortion with the American people having been educated a little bit better, that abortion is not ending, that it was a much more sophisticated decision than just a ban on abortion. It gave it to the states to decide. That the states are going to decide somewhat different things. Probably very few, if any, are going to have a ban. They're all going to have some period of time. And I guess the other issue that I don't know what else he talks about. I mean, he tries to talk about racism, but that seems to be over with. Mrs. Fetterman added to the whole thing by saying that she now believes that the sport of swimming is racist, which I don't know. I should think she must have pulled that out of their joint communist trove of ideas that she and Fetterman have. I mean, look, Fetterman was an idiot before he became brain affected. He had positions that could only be described as totally irresponsible, totally idiotic. He wanted to release a third of the people from prison. What would you call that? You would call that, I'm sorry, Mr. Fetterman, you have a stroke, but that's an idiotic position. That's going to get people killed. I mean, you got a problem, take care of it. Don't get people killed because you're such an incompetent. I mean, that's the problem with Biden. Biden has a serious problem. He should be in a nursing home. The fact that he wasn't in a nursing home means that those 13 people in Afghanistan are dead today who would not have been dead. Well, that's why I don't have sympathy for these people. Public office has consequences. Sometimes the consequences can be life and death. So I'm looking at the map to see, just to bring people up to date on the Senate races. And it seems to me that this is a little behind. I'd say a little behind. It has Georgia now leaning Republican. And it has Pennsylvania by the same degree leaning Democrat. It has New Hampshire likely Democrat. And it has Ohio and North Carolina likely Republican. And Wisconsin. I think Johnson has had a strong enough lead for a long enough time, so you can kind of put that one away. And I think you can do the same thing with Ohio and North Carolina. I think Pennsylvania is leaning Republican at this point. The last poll had Oz ahead, and that was just a day or two after the debate. And the discussion of the debate hasn't been, that much better since then. So I would say that Pennsylvania is now in the leaning Republican column, and New Hampshire is, I think, dead even. There's again another poll out today with Boldock 0.5% behind, half a point behind. And when Republicans keep creeping up like that, I mean, that's a very, very good sign for a party that often wins when they're losing by 2-3%. You don't see Democrats winning too often when they're losing by 2 or 3%. Whatever the reason for it is, Democrats poll better than they fare at the ballot box. And Republicans poll weaker and fare at the ballot box better. So it's not going to happen in every case, but you can add about 2% to a going into the election number for a Republican, particularly if it's a change in momentum situation. And in all these cases, it's a change in momentum. New Hampshire had been Hassan by 7 or 8. It's now Hassan by half a point. Pennsylvania was Fetterman by 7 or 8. Now it's Oz by 1.5 or 2, which is a statistical heat, but still it's a statistical heat pointing Republican, which is why I would say it's leaning Republican. Georgia also has a poll out now with Walker ahead, but also some polls with Warnock ahead.
When it comes to Georgia, Mayor, what do you think of some of these 11th hour allegations, not to speak to the veracity of the claims, but the political impact? Can this hurt Herschel Walker this close to an election?
No, I don't think so. I think they played themselves out. There were too many of them early. Anything this late, anything this late is going to be seen as purely political. And finally, people kind of got a cold towel in the face when they found out that Warnock ran his wife over. So this is this is a guy that does live in a very, very fragile glass house. He's had similar allegations that he's denied, and that leaves you in a very, very strange position. I mean, and also we've had Cuomo and Biden who have had allegations that. Well, certainly Biden, the public said, well, if they can't be proven, we're not going to hold it against him. And I think Walker did such a good job in the debate that he evened the score there. But particularly the disclosure that Warnock has, and it's not only he ran over his wife, he also has a history of her claiming she beat him, that he beat her. So, so Warnock, I think after all the money he spent on trying to paint that picture of Walker, when that picture applied to him definitely, it either helped Walker or it certainly neutralized it. I think the thing that helped Walker is Walker kept the debate on the issues, and on the issues, Warnock just loses, just straight out. I mean, he's an inflation creator. He's a guy that supported Biden 100% on every irresponsible thing Biden has done. He's been previously a defund the police guy. He was in the early stages of throwing the baseball World Series out of Atlanta. Then he changed his mind when he found out they're going to lose $100 million. So did Stacey Abrams. And I don't think he's being helped by Stacey Abrams, basically getting really beaten right now pretty badly by Kemp and running a terrible campaign. I mean, I don't know how you overcome saying that the baby doesn't have a heartbeat. As against all the science on it, even though a couple of the liberal publications, like they did for Fauci, changed the science to fit her. Now all of a sudden, because Stacey Abrams said it, babies don't have a heartbeat until after they're born. But I think that one, and after all, we are talking about a state that although it's purple, right, it can go Republican and Democrat. It certainly isn't California or New York, which is, like a brainwashed left-wing entourage where people tease and say, we should trade it to Russia or something, or it fits better in China, or to the extent that it's Democrat, it's more, I'm not going to say conservative, but certainly not overwhelmingly, irresponsibly Democrat, it's not like Chicago that voted for 50 years for Democrats, even though people are getting slaughtered there under the Democrats. That wouldn't happen in Atlanta. Too much slaughtering, they're going to go back to the other party. And they, let's not fail to mention the fact that Atlanta is one of the high crime cities also, with a Democratic mayor, a Soros DA, and a very, very favorable attitude toward criminals, with both candidates running who previously had very soft attitudes toward criminals, now have abandoned those attitudes, but certainly are hardly considered to be people that are going to do much about law enforcement except oppose it. So I think Georgia, for the Democrats, is in deep trouble. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's overplaying the personal attacks. And here's what Democrats have not done. In the course of doing abortion, doing personal attacks, they've never said what they're going to do about inflation. So that leaves them open to kind of agreeing with Biden that we're going to make believe it doesn't exist. What Democrat has put out any kind of a program for reducing spending, which is what would help abortion, some reduction in spending? I may miss one, but I can't think of one. I mean, even Manchin caved in and voted for the last bill. So if indeed the number one problem is the economy, first thing I think they would like is if Biden was keeping mouth shut. I mean, he's saying things that have to be damaging to any Democrat candidate unless they contradict him. He's basically telling people not to believe what they can see better than he can. That there's inflation, that there's a significant increase in the cost of living. I hate to pick on Speaker Pelosi today with her husband having been attacked today, although he's sounds like he's going to come out of it perfectly, thank God. But I mean, still, these things are relevant. She made the absolutely idiotic statement that the real issue is the cost of living, not inflation. Well, of course, what we really are fighting is the cost of living, not inflation. Well, I mean, that shows you how confused they are. Well, of course it's the cost of living. But what's the reason for the increase in the cost of living? Inflation. So they're giving answers that people of modest intellect and common sense will scratch their heads and say, what? No wonder they're not solving it. They don't understand it. We're fighting inflation, not inflation, which is what she basically said. And what people want to hear is, what are you going to do to bring costs down? And they're not hearing it.
They're not hearing it.
Now the House races are really trending Republican. You got 6 races in New York, in which it wouldn't be by any means an irresponsible prediction to say the Republicans are going to pick up 4 of them, and that would be unheard of 4 years ago, or 2 years ago rather. You could see the beginnings of it last year when the Republicans won the suburbs, which they hadn't won since Pataki. So that 20 years of being in the wilderness from the governor's office really comes about not because of the Republican candidates for governor, both of whom who won had to leave in roaring, horrible, embarrassing scandals. One would think, if New York were a more sensible place, a place more balanced, let's say a Georgia, the Democratic candidate for governor would get absolutely beaten no matter who it was, even if it was a candidate of some ability and not Hochul.
Why does someone like Kathy Hochul, the current New York governor, why does she have such a strong chance of winning re-election with the state of things at the national level for the Democrat Party?
Because the state is reflexively 2-to-1 Democrat. Now, contrast it with the city that's 5 or 6-to-1 Democrat, and you get an idea of why in 120 years there have been 4 Republican mayors, 2 of whom became Democrats. Not this one. And
Bloomberg being one of them.
Bloomberg and Lindsay became Democrats. LaGuardia and Giuliani remained Republicans. But actually, I'm not going to say what I was about to say about who performed better or didn't. But in any event, there is a thing, and I don't know if people realize it, and probably only Republicans will agree with this, maybe some independents. Republicans perform better in office because they have to. They're used to having to work. Democrats are praised when they fail. So they become like Biden. Biden is a creature of the media enabling him. And the media enabling him to be worse than mediocre. When a fellow cabinet member of yours at the end of your career says you've never been right about a matter of foreign policy, you must have been a pretty horrendous public servant. Well, that was Biden. And nobody knew then what a crook he was. I mean, look, this $11 million thing with China came out today. Now, I put that out a year and a half ago. And that's part of the 31 million that is established by the hard drive. But for some reason, people decided, Johnson and Grassley decided to focus on it today. There's no doubt about that. It isn't like, oh, gee, maybe. I haven't even heard them deny it. They haven't denied it.
Denied what?
That they got money from China.
This is the Biden family.
Yeah. The Biden family got $31 million from China, right from the hard drive. There is a statement that Biden gets 30% of all 50% of all of Hunter's income. There was a specific deal where he was going to get an extra 10%. That's 10% for the big guy. That's one of them. So this is money that went to, for a period of time, Vice President Biden, and then Biden as a civilian, but preparing to run for the presidency, taking money from our biggest enemy. Now, beyond a crime, that's a horrendous national security problem. Again, I say to people, suppose Kennedy or Nixon were taking money from Russia. Suppose Nixon and Kissinger were taking money from China when they went to China and made the peace. And then when you look at how incredibly, almost irrationally favorable he is to China, that you say to yourself, how can you not at least ask the question, are you influenced by that incredibly life-changing amount of money that China gave you? And China, we know, deliberately has itself organized in order to corrupt American political officials and American businesses and athletes. That's how they want to take us over, take over the world. They announced they want to take over the world. I mean, the things that I'm saying now, they have told us, except they have paid so many Americans to make believe it isn't true. The Americans make believe it isn't true because they seem to be more interested in money than their love of their country. And they sold their love of their country for 30 pieces of silver. Well, a lot more than that, actually.
All right, well, let's turn to some of these Senate races as we're even a day closer to Election Day than we were yesterday. New polling in some races, including Colorado, where the Republican candidate, Mr. O'Day, is running a very strong race. It's one that some are saying could be a potential upset. That race is within 6 points according to recent polling. So let's start out west. Any shot at Mr. O'Day upsetting Senator Bennett, and after that we'll move to Nevada and Arizona.
One, there's a shot. Two, the red wave. I think I said about Colorado a couple of days ago. It's sort of one of those at the outer end of the red wave.
Yep.
If it's a really big red wave, yes, they'll take Colorado. And if the red wave continues at the pace that and doesn't, I don't say reverse itself, but slow down, it's quite possible. It's been so intense over the last 2 weeks that it'll remain roughly where it is now, or gain 2 or 3 points more, but not 6 or 7. And second, though, you got to wonder about the poll. I mean, any intelligent observer of politics would have to take a 6-point pollster-produced poll and say maybe it's a 4 or 3 point lead. Because as I said, you tell me the Republican that ever underperformed a poll in a close race. You want to tell me Democrats that have underperformed polls? Even the ones that win do. So there's some kind of a bias built into polling, whether it's deliberate or it's the sampling that they do, or it's not adequately assessing the enthusiasm of the Republican voter on Election Day. I mean, that's clearly what happened in Pennsylvania in 2020. Whether you want to say it was fixed or you want to say it was cheating or whatever, it certainly was a massive heart attack creating surprise for Democrats that all of a sudden Donald Trump, who just barely won Pennsylvania 4 years earlier, is sitting there on election at 800,000 votes ahead in Pennsylvania. That's a hell of a lot of Republicans that came out to vote. So Republicans were enthusiastic in 2020. It was the biggest vote any president ever received for re-election, ever. Trump, exceeded by an almost hard to believe vote by a man who couldn't produce 20 people at a rally. A bigger vote than Hillary, a bigger vote than Obama. This is a guy who can't really go anywhere right now and not hurt his candidates. But in any event, the enthusiasm driven by fear and anger is probably greater among Republicans today than it was in 2020, I would say. I mean, there was great enthusiasm for, first of all, 2020 was a hard year to have great enthusiasm because of the pandemic. People have been locked up, and there was great enthusiasm for Trump. Witness the rallies that he had that produced these tremendous of people, even though there was a pandemic going on. But just, you tell me what you think, Ted. you've been through both races, and don't you think the enthusiasm among Republicans now, whereas in 2020 the enthusiasm was largely a positive one because the Republicans and many independents believed that Trump had been an exceptionally good president. Of course, Democrats rejected it completely, but Republicans just as strongly.
Yeah.
I mean, the rallies for Trump indicate love. It might be hard for a Democrat to understand. They hate him so much, but I still think the fear factor among Republicans right now is at the highest I've ever seen it. That has to convert itself in I'm going to say much bigger turnout than 2020 because it was a big turnout for Republicans, but at least 4 or 5% more, I think.
I think you're right, Mayor. Part of it is that people are seeing, I think a lot of independents are becoming Republican after seeing almost 2 years of the Biden economic agenda and some of the cultural issues and where the Democrat Party is positioning itself. It's turning off independents, as you've said.
So we're here mostly in New York, right? I travel a bit, but I'm mostly in New York. And in New York, Democrats will talk to me. Other places, I mean, Democrats seem like they want to kill Republicans, driven largely by Biden's rhetoric that Republicans are traitors, basically. But in any event, I can tell you about New York, whoever wins, Zeldin has considerably more enthusiasm than Hochul. Hochul's going to win if she does because she's a Democrat. Nobody's really happy with her.
Are there just more Democrats in New York than Republicans?
But they're different kinds of Democrats than you have elsewhere. They're like California Democrats. They're brainwashed Democrats. They're Democrats who have lost the ability, like in Chicago, who vote Democrat for 50 years, even though there's a slaughter of mostly Democrats every weekend. That's irrational. The other parts of the country, like where we have these purple states that are closed, like Georgia, even to some extent North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, they're not as irrational.
Sure.
So it's almost a Pavlovian vote. You know, Pavlov's dogs. Democrat, I vote Democrat. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I used to get this more. Now I get a different response more often, but I used to get this a lot. Mayor Giuliani, you're the first Republican I ever voted for. The person might have been 80. How could they, for 80 years, have voted for Democrats? We've had some pretty terrible Democrats, you know, ones that have gone to jail. But it's if this were a toss-up state, as opposed to a Pavlovian Democrat state, Zeldin would be ahead by 4 or 5 points, maybe even more, because she's a terrible candidate. I mean, no one exceeds Fetterman, of course, in being almost totally unexplainable as a candidate. In fact, if he were to be elected, it would be a scandal for the American voter. I mean, people around the world are going to wonder if we really lost our minds. I mean, there's no doubt he doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and there's no doubt that. I mean, you don't even have to be a doctor to realize that they're jeopardizing his life. I mean, the man had a stroke. Strokes come about to some extent because of stress. The last thing in the world you need recovering from a stroke is stress. Clearly he had a bad stroke. I mean, I know people that had strokes that were talking normal 2 days the next day. This had to be a different kind of stroke than 4 or 5 of my friends who had strokes, and you know, you wouldn't know it. It's been 2 months since his stroke, and he can't speak English. He needs to have some kind of machine translate for him into English, and then when it gets translated, he seems not to know what he's saying. Now, you know, I don't know him before he had the stroke, but when I see the quotes from him, he's pretty wacky before it. I mean, in a way, the only way the stroke helps him at all is it obscures, to some extent, the totally wild left-wing, socialist, communist, irresponsible, and anarchistic view that he has. You know, let him out of prison, supports the DA in Philadelphia who's Democrats want to get rid of, because he's gotten people killed there. This isn't, I mean, this is not any longer the game of politics. This is life and death. I mean, you reelect these people, there's absolutely no doubt, and I will tell you this as from the point of view of my expertise on crime, more people are gonna, if you elect Democrats, more people will die. Democrats are now a pro-criminal party. And the ones who aren't do not speak out sufficiently to overcome the ones who drive it in a pro-criminal direction. Only the public reaction has slowed it down. But when you look as an example of what's going on all over America at the Zeldin-Hochul debate, Zeldin laid out 5 or 6 very specific, tough but reasonable proposals to reduce crime. Hochul laid out none, and then cast doubt on whether there really is that much crime by saying, why do you always think about it? Well, because it's, I mean, he didn't have the time, and you can't say everything, and it's much easier. He should have said, because unlike you, I'm concerned about citizens in my state being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, you're much more concerned on getting that couple million for your husband, but I'm more concerned about the people of my state being killed.
Marshall says Minnesota loves Rudy. Becky is saying hi from Kansas
You know,
City,
how about
Missouri.
that governor's race? There's a chance there. You want to look that one up, because I've been concentrating on the Senate, largely because it's the Senate and the House that is going to determine our destiny to a large extent. And I believe, unless the whole world is wrong, that we're going to win the House. So the thing up for debate is the Senate.
So in Minnesota, you have incumbent Governor Tim Walz of the Democrat farmer DFL. Democrat
one of the
farmer.
guys who helped create the riots of 2020 and tolerated massive breaking of the law. And I think all those people, unlike the people of January 6th, who are still sitting in prison, have been let out. And the people in the riots of 2020 actually killed people. None of the January 6th people did. They actually burned down entire buildings. The Capitol wasn't burned down. What they did was wrong and deserves commensurate punishment. But the people in 2020 deserve much more punishment and have had none. He's one of the people that's the architect of that.
So Scott Jensen is polling well, still behind
How much?
Tim Walz. We'll see what the latest polling is showing. It does show a 7-point race still in that race. Let's see what 538 is saying. So similar to Colorado, where the Democrat is expected to win, but maybe closer.
I think it's closer. I mean, from what I've seen, I think it's closer than that. And maybe what we should do, is take a look at Real Clear Politics and look at the average. I mean, that it's not going to, I mean, how often has it been wrong? A lot. But at least it gives you something on which you can measure what we're talking about, or you guys can assess what I'm saying. So we give you something, just beyond my my view, which I'm sure some people would say is prejudiced. I'm trying hard, I know everybody says it, trying to be objective. I mean, there's no point in not. I'd like to, at the end, have you think, boy, he's really brilliant when he gets the numbers just right. And before the end, I will, before the end, I'll tell you what I think. So let's see if we have a one for Minnesota here. Why don't I give you some of these? They're interesting, right? So Walker's up by 3, and his running mate Kemp is up by 9, which has to be helping him. The governor, Kemp, who of course I harbor some questions about in my role as the lawyer for Donald Trump, but it's remarkable what he's done with Stacey Abrams. This poll here, assuming again we can't trust polls, but they rarely are wrong with regard to, I mean, they rarely, you rarely have a Republican winning a poll that loses the election. You got plenty of Republicans that are losing polls by 2 and 3 that win an election. And I'd like to go back sometime and have somebody really study these polls and see what the percentage is of Republicans that outperform polls and Democrats who outperform polls. In my experience, it's Republicans who outperform polls. But I mean, in my own races and in races I've been deeply involved in, every single race I've been involved in deeply, the Republicans outperformed the poll, except when you get these runaways and then it just takes off. Like the Democrat wins by 15 and then it goes to 20 or 25 because the Republicans just give up. But if we're talking about a single digit race, Republicans always do a little better. So we have Kemp by 9. Now, conversely, in New York, we have Hochul by 8 and we have Schumer by 13. Now, I know you're going to think this is crazy, but Schumer by 13 is very, very small for a guy that wins by 25. I mean, I won re-election as a Republican in a 6-1 Democratic city by 18 points.
You won by 18 points.
Correct. He's ahead by 13. I mean, I know that he's not going to lose, but that has to be the decline of the Democrat brand. That's why it's down. Whitmer's up by 7. I tend to think that's inflated.
Whitmer is up by 7?
Whitmer is up by 7. Now, you look at Massachusetts, which is as Democrat a state as New York, and the gubernatorial candidate, Healy's up by 28. That's the kind of number that a Democrat in New York, when things are good, gets. Like Cuomo won by 20, 25. The disapproved number now for Biden, he's underwater by 8. Every generic poll, whether it's Rasmussen, Data for Progress, Trafalgar, has the Republicans up by 7, 4, and 6 on the generic ballot. Now, I'll just tell you the conclusion, not that I'm predicting it. That would suggest a wipeout. So go back for some reference here to 2010, when the Republicans gained, I may be somewhat off, but I thought it was about 60 seats, maybe 70 in the House. I believe we were either even or down by 2 in the generic ballot. Here we're up by, I've never seen Republicans in a generic ballot. It may go back to Reagan or Eisenhower. Never seen Republicans up by 6, 4, and 7. This is who would you rather? They don't ask about a candidate. Who would you rather vote for? Which brand is better, Republican or Democrat?
Steven Schumacher in Michigan says, "I'm in Michigan and Tudor is going to pull it off."
Yeah, I think so. I'm judging by the debate that they had, and I thought I have a very low opinion of Governor Whitmer, which is why I disrespectfully call her Governor Witless. And she's largely because I can't stand these hypocrites. I could not stand the hypocrisy of the pandemic, where these people were acting like little dictators, petty little dictators, telling people, they couldn't go to restaurants, they couldn't go to church, they couldn't go to school, they couldn't, and they were doing whatever the heck they wanted. I mean, Newsom was going out partying. Lighthead was going out getting her Lightfoot.
Mayor Lightfoot.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it.
Lighthead.
Lighthead was getting her hair done, but no other woman in Chicago could get her hair done, just her, because she had to look good, but everybody else could look awful. I mean, politicians are disliked for the changing positions and stuff. Are they disproportionately hypocritical? I don't know. I think socialist politicians are, because socialist politicians have to become autocrats, because people instinctually, the minute they become at all successful, the minute, I used to see it, we had a program to help people buy homes. maybe it was $150,000 home, and they would have to put up about 20,000, maybe 10,000, and then we take care of the entire mortgage with city and state money. I've forgotten the name of the program. You know how many of those people became at least capitalists when they saw that? And this is in the era when they bought a $150,000 home for $10,000. When within 3 or 4 years, the $150,000 home was worth $250,000, and they made $100,000 on their $10,000. Many people don't realize that can happen. It can happen when the government makes you a serf, but it does happen under capitalism, which of course can have its excesses. But of all the systems, economic systems, there's no question by factors that you can't even measure, it's taken more people out of poverty than any other economic system, and in a way that is very liberating. So I'm looking at the Thursday numbers, and but for one race, Republicans are ahead in every single one of them. Shapiro is ahead of Mastriano by 8 points, which is a real tragedy because Shapiro is just as left-wing as Fetterman, but does a better job of hiding it. And Mastriano is a great candidate who just doesn't have the money. But I mean, I still think if the Fetterman thing really created, because look now, Oz is ahead by 3.
And that's shifted since the debate.
About five points.
Have you seen? When's the last time you saw a debate shift a race 5 points, Mayor?
When did you ever see a debate as bad as that? I mean, I've never seen anybody in a debate. He did everything wrong.
How did he open up the debate?
Hello, everyone. Good night. Like it was over. But then I think the reporters didn't treat him like the usual Democrat that they ask, would you like a little more water? And then they'll say to the Republican, but you lied about 14 things. That lady nailed him with his contradictory statements on fracking. He just flat out lied.
He lied. He
didn't. And he could have said he changed his position because, all the rest of it. Maybe it's because of his the damage to his brain. He can't think fast enough. But he was asked to explain why your position 2 years ago is you were vehemently against fracking and now you're enthusiastically for it. And he just said, I was always for fracking. All he had to say is, I'm for fracking now. And if he wanted to just continue to say that, maybe he would sound stupid. He wouldn't sound like a liar. So, I mean, I'm surprised Oz is only ahead by 3. But if that continues to open up, if he continues to do things like he appeared today and his wife spoke for him, and his wife has now taken the position, you see if you agree with this, that swimming is racist.
Let us know in the comments below. Is swimming
that the sport of
racist?
Swimming is that it deliberately it tells black people you can't swim. Walker has now pulled out to a 5-point lead, even better than Oz. Laxalt has a 4-point lead, which we didn't talk about. In Nevada, the Republican candidate for governor is ahead of Laxalt, helping him with a 7-point lead. In Oregon, the Republican has a 2-point lead for governor. In Oregon, now, that really makes sense. I don't know, and maybe because we're so far away on the East Coast, but I've had at least 4 or 5 incidents in New York where people who live in Portland have come up to me and engaged me in conversation to ask me if I would go there and fix it. They tell me, and these are people who travel, it's the worst city in the country. Now, and then they explain some of the factors. It seems to me, they're relating their experience, but that Philadelphia is worse. I just do it based on, crime numbers. But maybe from where they came from and where they are now, this is culture shock. Philadelphia has always been a scrappy city and never the most dangerous city in America. That's been made into the most dangerous by the Democrats and certainly by Soros's DA. I mean, you can trace it right to when he was elected. But the people in Portland, as far as I can tell, have a bigger reaction than the people in Philadelphia. People in Philadelphia are not happy. But like the people in New York, they've lived through crime eras before. I mean, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington are supposed to be, the wonderland. But they've turned out to be woke capitals that want to have their own drug-overwhelmed cities. You want some of the Democrat Pavlovian leads? Those are by brainwashed Democrats. Newsom is leading by 19. Moore in Maryland is leading by 31. So you still have
Gavin Newsom. What do you think? Could he emerge as a potential replacement for Joe Biden on the 2024 Democrat presidential ticket?
The last poll on right track, wrong track was 66% wrong track and 24% right track. And in Georgia, which is more important right now than a national poll, Trump would beat Biden 47-39. That's the one that he theoretically lost to Georgia, where Mr. Giuliani has a lot of affidavits. Oh my goodness. Well, in any event, but that tells you, forget the last election, that tells you the current condition of this election. And what about Arizona, where Lake is ahead by 11?
Kerry Lake ahead by 11. We've had some questions about the Arizona races and where you think
Kelly
those
is only
races
ahead
stand.
by 2, which is a dangerous number for a Democrat in a state that is, in fact, more Republican than Democrat, with a senator who's still living off tragic events that happened and his own exploits, but has been and I don't think I'm saying anything out of school, a very lazy, unproductive senator. In comparison to Sinema, who got elected with him, who, although she finally caved in, has figured out how to leverage her position to get things for Arizona. The general impression about Kelly is that he's really out of his league in the Senate. Doesn't know what he's doing, or is lazy.
Okay, and heading to Nevada, Adam Laxalt, some new polling showing him in good position against incumbent Senator Mosto. What is the key for a Republican to win in Nevada, and what do Democrats need to rely on in order to hold on?
To make sure they don't cheat with the unions. First of all, the early voting, and then on election day. I mean, they still have a pretty good operation for cheating on election day in Las Vegas. So I mean, I hope that Adam, who was a law enforcement guy, I hope he's done what I did when I ran against him in '93, and that is invest some of the money I was going to put on television I put $1 million aside just for an integrity operation, because a number of people told me that they had stolen a lot of votes from us in a very close election in '89. But that was the era in which you didn't contest elections. You followed the sort of Nixon example. So I never contested that election. I also thought realistically, in a corrupt New York legal system, which we have in the city, a Republican would never win. I mean, you have to be naive, and many people are, if you think that in these Democrat-controlled dictatorships, that it doesn't reach the courts. Of course it reaches the courts. That's who appoints them, the crooked politicians. I mean, one of the people that I investigated and probably made me famous in putting all of the Democrat officials in jail was the borough president of Queens, and he committed suicide before he would stand trial, but he was alleged to have taken $100,000 per judge. Well, that tells you something about him, but it tells you something about the judge, doesn't it?
That's a good point. And we're just, we have about 10 minutes left. Tonight's show is flying by. Live with the mayor. Comment below your name and where you're tuning in from, and visit RudyGiulianiCS.com. That's RudyGiulianiCS.com for the mayor's latest podcast and so much more on Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, what does the CS stand for in your website, rudygiulianics.com?
Common sense. And I do think you'll enjoy the present one. I think you'll find it also more than enjoy. You'll find it an important one to watch because with everything else going on, this is not being reported on adequately, and that is the protest, which my guest, Ali Reza Jafsadati, describes as a revolution in Iran. And I mean, if you step back from it now and just process what you know, you say, oh my goodness, yeah, that's right. I mean, they've been since Ms. Amini was killed for having little tufted hair out, there have been 2 straight months of protests in 193 separate cities of Iran, which is a very diverse country. And all of the ethnic groups are of one mind, and that is that the Ayatollah has to go, which are the signs that they hold up, the penalty being death. They've killed a large number. They've put 20,000 people in prison. That's a lot of thousands. It had an impact before in quelling the riots, at least for a period of time. I mean, since 17, it's almost been continuous riots. The regime got a great favor in the pandemic because they could then lock everybody up, which is what they really want to do, and just give money to terrorists. I mean, half the people of Iran are starving. Iran is one of the richest countries on earth, on its own. Number 2, it gets plenty of money from other countries, like the money that Obama gave them in cash. That money goes to terrorists. All you have to do is say that Obama gave them money in cash, and we know the money goes to terrorists. When we give out foreign aid, whether you think it's wise or not, we wire the money. And we have an accountability program to check on it, or we're supposed to. We just gave them cash. That's unheard of between governments. That's what you do when you pay a bribe. That's what you do if you're corrupt. That's what you do if you're an organized criminal. And that's what you do if you're a drug dealer. And that's what you do when you have to pay terrorists. It saved the Ayatollah having to take it, convert it into cash, and give it to Hezbollah. Now, think about it. That money was used without any doubt over the period of the next year, 2 years, 3 years to kill Americans. Soleimani, who Trump successfully found and gave him his just reward, his main focus was using the Quds forces to go into Iraq and pick off Americans. Biden, by the way, opposed that execution, just like he opposed taking bin Laden. And this is before, I think, he suffered from dementia. Remember, Gates, Secretary of Defense under Obama, right from his book. Just think of the incredible disregard he must have for Biden to say this. This is before he was president. And then he repeated, well, let me quote it. He's never made a correct foreign policy decision. Then he went on and mentioned about 7 or 8 of them. Imagine saying that about the vice president. Then when he was the candidate for president, he was asked, Mr. Gates, do you still agree with that? And he had the courage to say, yeah, absolutely. And think of what he's done as president. So Afghanistan doesn't come out of a vacuum. Afghanistan was predicted for us by at least Gates and by many, many other people that would say to you that he was really the dumbest guy in the Senate. I know him. He's profoundly stupid. Now he's also has whatever brain he had that wasn't, functioning at a level where he could actually get through law school or had to cheat his way through, or now, even part of that brain is gone.
So some more shout outs. We just have 5 minutes left. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share with 1 or 2 members of your family and friends.
So where should they subscribe? On rudygiulianics.com?
Yes, they should visit your website. They should also subscribe to your YouTube channel if they haven't already. You should punch the like button. And again, share with your family and friends. If you're talking to them this weekend, whoever you might be with, let them know. The mayor is now doing nightly live videos on YouTube and across his social media platforms for 1 hour each night, weeknight. And it's we're focused on the midterms now, but following the midterm elections, we will be covering a whole host of topics.
We may go right to 2024 too, as well as the conditions going on in the United States, and spend a lot of time on crime, which is where I think I can make a contribution. But in any event, I'd like them to go to rudygiulianics.com, and I have a big box there for you giving me advice. I wish you'd do that. I mean, it helps. Even if you tell me, hey, Mayor or Rudy or whatever, that was the stupidest thing I ever heard. Here's the real, you were dead wrong about that. It's not 72%, it's only 40, or whatever.
And you can do that right here.
We all make mistakes. We're all wrong sometimes. I don't mean all wrong all the time, except for Biden and Fetterman. But we all need that, because we all, I don't care who we all have limited views. We're all limited by, even people who have very wide range of travel and associates, still are, that's a limited, there's a big world and a big country. It's still limited. So that's why this is a very, very valuable. It was valuable when I was a public official and I went out and solicited it, and also had a radio show every week so that people could call in and complain about me, and had a town hall meeting every month in every borough so they could complain about me. And there were no, didn't have a teleprompter. I didn't have set up anybody in the audience. They were for real. I've always been for real. I'm not a phony politician. Like, unfortunately, I probably the majority of them.
We have some people. We have Jet, who's helping to moderate the discussion on YouTube. He's tuning in while also attending a bonfire. So I'm not sure if he is.
I hope he's not. I hope he's not controlling the bonfire. I mean, we want him to pay attention to the bonfire.
Absolutely. So we have Jet, and again, thank you.
Where is he doing this? Tell me it's in the middle of New York City. I'll get worried.
Jet, let us know where you're having this bonfire.
Not in Central Park, I would hope.
Yeah. And then Molly, Daryl, and Scotty, every night this week, they've been helping us as well, Mayor. Tuning in from across the country and around the world. Just a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts on the week and what to watch as we get close to the
over the weekend, if you want to look for politics, see what impact the Obama visits have. The Biden visits have been a disaster. If anything, you can see with some of these polls where the numbers have gone up precipitously for Republicans. Those are some of the places Biden has visited. And he should stop talking. I mean, he says the stupidest things, particularly fighting the idea that there's inflation when all the voters are going to buy groceries every day or every week. I mean, he gets contradicted not by me, not by the Republicans, not by even the media. He gets contradicted by life. That's deadly. If I were a Democrat running, I'd send him a message and say, gee, can't you go sleep in your basement for a while like you do when you're running for president? And they could really lock up Fetterman, too, because that had to hurt Democrats broadly, because it shows how cynical the Democrat Party is to run a person like that. It also shows you how cruel they are. And that's a cruel thing to do. They're risking that man's life by putting him, number one, under this kind of stress, and number two, offering him for the United States Senate for the next 6 years when he's had such a serious stroke. I mean, the Senate, you can tease about it, but it's a darn stressful place. I mean, you live in Washington, and I've lived in Washington. Washington is just living there is pure stress.
What part of Washington did you live in, Mayor?
I lived on the Hill, right across from the Supreme Court, which was very nice for me because I would get up in the morning and run in those days, and I would always see Justice Stevens coming in and wave to him because I argued before the Supreme Court. And of course, my position as Associate Attorney General, as the third ranking official in the Justice Department when I lived there, so I knew most of them. And then when I was there at a much lower level as a staffer to the Deputy Attorney General in the Ford administration, which was the post-Watergate Justice Department of Edward Levy that put in a lot of the reforms, like the FISA court, I lived right across the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge in Arlington, Virginia, in a big, big building that overlooks the city that my staff is tired of me pointing out when we pass it. I live there, right behind the Marine Corps Memorial.
Right there.
Yeah, I could look out. And it was in those days. It was a rather inexpensive apartment. It was a beautiful apartment, but rather I won't even tell you what. I think it was like $300 a month, and now you got to pay more for homeless space at $300 a month. But I had a very nice view of the Marine Corps Memorial, which always makes you patriotic. And then I would look out at the Lincoln and the Capitol, and I could even see a little of the Jefferson.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, Mayor. We want everyone to tune in again next week, starting Monday.
We're throwing a lot of things at you. We go to WABCRadio.com at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and I will be doing a live broadcast, the #1 show on Sunday, with Dr. Maria, called Uncovering the Truth. It's an exciting format. It's proven to be very popular, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It has a somewhat different, take on these things, and the doctor is quite an expert on COVID, on vaccines, on all of the scientific issues, and now this indoctrination of our children and the attempt to, I think, what is really child abuse.
So that'll be on WABC.com Sunday morning,
10 to 11, and you can get it all over the world, just like you can the podcast. In this case, you go to WABC Radio, which is the oldest radio station in New York, the original radio station of Rush Limbaugh, by the way, WABCRadio.com.
Thank you, and we will see you back here on YouTube and our various live streams Monday night at 8 p.m. Good night.
Thank you very much, and have a really blessed weekend. God bless America.